Hey guys, Pastor Ben here. Welcome to this kind of special presentation of FCC Grayson's video ministry here. We are sitting down today, kind of wrapping up our series on mental and emotional health, and we're going to be talking with one of FCC's own, Allison Jackson, and we're going to talk and debrief a little bit from a professional standpoint, not just from a pastoral, but from a professional standpoint on mental and emotional health. All right, Allison, thank you for joining us here today. I appreciate you taking the time out and being here.
Thanks.
All right, so a lot of people are familiar with you. You're kind of an FCC native. You spent a little bit of time, down in another country of kind of southern Kentucky. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. But for most of your life, you've been a part of the First Church family here. Most people know you, but for those who don't and don't know your background and what you do, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. So yes, I'm FCC raised, I guess is the term. Grew up here, went away to college, got a bachelor's degree in speech pathology, and then went on actually to work and seek a master's in counseling. We lived away for 20 years trying to get back to Grayson. Wanted out of Grayson, then wanted to come home. But I have spent the last 20 years in the field of counseling, psychology, mental health, in several different areas, outpatient mental health, inpatient mental health, teaching for 9 years. Never thought I would do that. When we came back here, I taught for 9 years at KCU in the psychology department. So in the middle of a pandemic, I was missing what I really love to do, and that's counseling. So last year, I went back full-time to counseling at a outpatient clinic in Russell.
And that's, I think, that we've all seen, throughout this pandemic, especially. I mean, we all have daily life struggles and, some amplified more than others at different times, but especially during this past 16 months of pandemic, that it's been really difficult on just about everyone to varying degrees. And that's one of the things that we felt from a church standpoint that it was important to address that, mental and emotional health and the importance of that from a biblical perspective, all the while continuing to encourage everyone to reach out, seek help. It's not a sign of weakness.
Absolutely.
Actually, the opposite of that. I know in some of our conversations we've had privately, it's very much a strength and a show of strength and acknowledgement. So one of the things that I feel like I know is a kind of a value of mine from a pulpit standpoint and a Sunday morning standpoint is to be transparent and to be vulnerable to the congregation and just to be real. Because I think sometimes at certain professions or positions, people have a little bit of this mindset that people have it all figured out. And if they're a professional in an area, then they don't tend to struggle with the same thing. So I'd kind of like for you to take a moment and just kind of let that guard down because, you're in the field of being a medical or mental health professional, and that doesn't exempt you from mental health and emotional health struggles.
Absolutely.
So I'd like you to speak to that if you would.
Well, even prior to pandemic, in past jobs, I mean, mental health as well as healthcare workers, period. I mean, it's a tough job. You deal with people's emotions, their health issues, their life issues every day. And sometimes that's overwhelming after days and days of listening and trying to help them find ways to work through that. So that in of itself is just a small portion of that. And sometimes people do get burnout in this field because they have a hard time leaving those issues at work and then going home and trying to live their family life and live life in general. So burnout is very real in this field, in the healthcare field, period. Compassion fatigue is another area that sometimes you have just heard it over and over and over again. So many issues and so many things that happen, and then you hear some other things that may not be nearly as bad as some of the people that you're working with. And sometimes if you are near burnout and very tired, your compassion is waning. It's you feel a little frustrated with your client maybe, or you feel a little restless in trying to work with them, or maybe they're not willing to work on things, so you get frustrated with them, and that's not uncommon.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you feel tired.
Right. So a couple months ago, I know that Thomas, who is our youth pastor here, did kind of a panel at youth group one night, and you sat in on that, and it was the importance of mental health. And I know that one of the questions that the panel fielded was from the kids was, is it okay with our faith to be on medicine? To be prescribed and to kind of depend on that. And I don't know if it's quite as much of a stigma with adults as it is teenagers, but I still feel like that stigma is out there,
It's still there.
especially with faith. And that's been something that the church has projected, and hopefully we're taking steps to kind of remedy that. But what would be your counsel to someone who's maybe in this pandemic, their mental health and their struggle has kind of been heightened as to what it was before, and they've kind of got that same hesitation and that same question as to, is it possible for me to be a Christian and still seek professional and medical help in this? What would be your counsel?
There's clients that come in every day. They say, I felt like if I was a good Christian, or if I was good enough and read the Bible enough and did this and did this and did this, I won't have these issues. That's not what it says anywhere. I don't believe it. But when they finally come to the realization that, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to come in, and sometimes it's just a vent. Sometimes it's just to let some of that out, because number one, we can't tell our family always. They want to fix it. They want to help us to change it, and they can't sometimes help us to change it. We can't tell others because they don't always keep our confidences. It's not private. It's not something that won't get passed on to the next person. So to come into counseling, to ask for help, sometimes if they need medications, and sometimes things are clinical enough. And I describe to my clients this: if you had a medical health problem, if your sugar was running high and you couldn't get it down by changes of diet or changing anything in your lifestyle, would you not go to the doctor for help with medications and things like that to help to control it better? Well, then why won't we with mental health?
Good point.
Why won't we? Because mental health and physical health really are no different. We're treating one different part of the body, and that's it. And sometimes we need some help. Sometimes it's through medication. Sometimes it's through counseling. Sometimes it's through both. Sometimes it is seeking faith leadership and faith counseling to help, because we struggle in our faith sometimes as well, along with that. So, we need a variety of treatments and things like that to help us to manage it.
And sometimes mental health and mental issues and struggles can eventually manifest into physical problems.
Absolutely. So we are seeing a ton of that right now and I know we haven't even got to this point, but with high levels of anxiety is very, very physical. So is depression as well. And you see a lot more health problems, a lot more pain problems, a lot more health problems, period, with increased symptoms of depression.
So let's talk about that for just a few moments, because for whatever reason, oftentimes we feel like we're on an island by ourselves, and that we are the only ones experiencing this. I'm feeling this. I'm going through this. This is what's processing, and it's maybe not processing well. And I know that nobody else is going through what I'm struggling with, and that's why I consider it a weakness, because everybody around me seems like they've got it all together, without violating any privacy or anything like that. Can you tell us some of the things that you are seeing from faith-based people, from Christians, that they're seeking help with, that they're struggling with? And I basically, I want this to serve as encouragement to maybe someone watching that feels like they're all alone in this.
Well, as I said before, we already, pre-pandemic, anxiety levels were high. Life stressors, they're just high. So anxiety levels are high, depression levels are high. We see lots of people struggling in those areas. But add then the pandemic stress, and I don't think any of us even realized March of 2020 what would come as of today.
The
stressors, how much they changed.
Yeah. Or how long we were going to be in the middle of this.
Exactly.
Just...
Exactly. So you add all of that, health issues, being scared. It's okay to be scared of what this has been like and what could happen. That fear is real, but do we need to find ways to channel that fear so we don't stay in our house for the next 20 years? Those are things that are very, very real. So anxiety levels are high, depression levels are high. Then you add all of these extra stressors on top of it. So we're seeing more people with panic attacks, more people with some very serious depression that absolutely needs to be treated through medication because of how serious those symptoms have become.
Yeah. It's some of these signs when you're talking about anxiety, depression, for people who really maybe have never dealt with these types of things on a consistent basis is what we seem to be facing them now. Some of the signs that I know with me personally, coming off of this series, the very first message that I preached, I think the statement was, I'm not okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not okay. And for me personally, I knew that I was being affected, but when I really had this realization that, hey, this is a little deeper than what I may have thought that it was, was the moment that I was having worries and thoughts and concerns over a particular thing, and I could not move on from it.
Like obsession.
Right. I was telling myself, you're not changing anything by worrying about this. That's the conversation, the dialogue that was going on in my head is, you're not going to change any of this by worrying about it. So change your train of thought, which has always worked for me in the past. But during that particular time, it wasn't. And I was like, okay, I need to recognize that something maybe not totally different is happening, but I'm experiencing this to a level and a depth that I've never experienced it before. Right. So what may be some signs or some situations that people are going through? Is there something that you could try to help key us in on?
Sure. So you think about normal anxiety. Normal anxiety, a kid, you have a fear, a test is coming up. You may not sleep well the night before, you feel your tummy feels bad, that kind of stuff. Or even us, we got a trip coming up or some important business meeting or this and this and this. You feel a little uncomfortable.
You could be recording a video when you don't.
Yes. But those are normal anxieties. But when they start to last for longer periods of time, you're not sleeping as well every night for a couple of weeks up to a month. You're not eating as well, or you're eating too much to try to help to make yourself feel better. You can't stop those obsessive thoughts. I call it a case of the what ifs. What if this happens? Well, what if that happens? Well, what if this happens? And it just keeps circling around in our brain till we can't almost function. And for some people, they can't function. Right. Those also can start the fight or start the fight or flight. So it creates so much anxiety that we begin to have what some people are experiencing as panic attacks, because I either have to deal with this right now or I've got to get out of here. And so they may have increased heart palpitations, chest pains, things that are very, very physical, stomach issues, headaches. Anxiety is so very physical. Yeah. Muscle aches and pains and cramps and just a variety. I mean, it can get very, very serious from there to the point that it's debilitating. Yeah. So we're seeing a huge increase of all of these types of symptoms. If symptoms are lasting for more than a few weeks, then you may need to talk to someone. Right. It may need to start with just your healthcare provider. If you feel like that's not working, you can always call. There's several clinics in the area that are open to treat mental health issues. There's psychiatrists that are fantastic. And people are like, I'm not going to a shrink. I'm not going to a head doctor. Would you go to a cardiologist if you had a heart problem?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and
So-
if you're self-treating and still experiencing all this, how's that working out for you?
So why would you not go to a psychiatrist to
Right.
treat mental health issues if you needed it?
Right. And
There's nothing wrong with it. The stigma has to go away.
Amen. Amen. You brought up the fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that while all of us, again, this is just another one of those areas that I think that we've seen such an exponentially more frequent these moments where we're experiencing this, because we've all had those moments in our lives where we've had to make that subconscious decision of, am I going to stay here and fight, or am I going to take flight, and just remove myself from this? I think that so many of us have coping mechanisms. When I know you've probably already touched on this a little bit, but for me, if I recognize my coping mechanism, then sometimes in my head I'm thinking, well, I've got the mechanism, so I'm processing it, I'm coping with it. But when we're seeing this frequency and intensity of these moments that cause us to either fight or go into flight, our coping mechanisms aren't always going to work.
They're not always working.
Especially when, like, if we're used to managing situations maybe we have a bad day once a week, and we've got that coping mechanism down.
Right.
Now we could be facing it 2 or 3 times a day, and now we're having to do that. So when would you advise someone to talk about, hey, we realize you may have established coping mechanisms, but here's some things that maybe you need to take the next step with?
Right. So, I mean, that's really when you touched on it right there. When it gets to, maybe once in a while we do have to use it. But when you're having to use this multiple times a day and it's not always working, and especially when it's not working and your symptoms are getting worse and worse, then we need to address it. We need to look for some different alternatives to help us to manage it. It's not, I'm not saying medication is a magic pill. There's never a magic pill. It's not that techniques, but can it help us to manage it, to decrease it and get it better under control, managed in a better way? Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the things that I frequently find myself going back to, because I've tried to be very clear with the church and the people here, is that myself, Thomas, the elders, church leaders, ministry leaders, we are a destination of help. But we're a very specialized destination of help. We help from a spiritual angle. And sometimes that's what it is. And it kind of ceases there. It's a spiritual perspective problem, and we can help with that. But when it goes beyond that, then we get to the place of going, hey, we're not qualified for this. Right. We need to kind of advance you and move you to a different source. With these types of things happening, I always try to encourage someone, don't let difficult moments discourage you in this mental and emotional health journey. And that's one of the things I try to be upfront with them pretty quickly on, is like, if you're unhealthy, the steps to getting healthy can sometimes be very, very difficult.
Yes, uncomfortable.
Yeah, almost always uncomfortable. So as from a therapist standpoint that's dealing with mental, the mindsets, the way that the mind is operating, what are some of the ways that you encourage people to not only get better, but be realistic and kind of help them to understand that this journey is not going to be a simple one?
It's not roses. It's not your floor is lined with roses and you're going to come in and it's just going to be rainbows and great things happen. I'm realistic with clients. I mean, like, it could be painful. You may not like me at certain times. I mean, I may bring up things and we may have to talk about things that are fairly real in your life. And I don't ever, I always tell them, I don't push you and force you to talk about some things that could be painful. But if you're holding them inside and they're festering to the point that you're miserable, and it better to take it out, look at it, and work through it so that it doesn't have to be so painful.
Right.
So, yeah, it can be uncomfortable and painful, but it can be. I have clients that come back and say, I'm so glad that we took that step and worked through that, because now I'm not holding on to it.
Good. All right. So as we kind of wrap things up here, I would like to open the floor up to you. I would kind of like to end with you, just giving a word of encouragement to those who may be watching again that may be on the fence about, seeking help or not seeking help. But if there's anything that you feel like is pertinent, is really important that we've not spoken about, I'd like to give you the opportunity to do that at this point.
I think just listening to my clients and things that they're telling me is, just because you come for help does not mean you're a bad Christian, that you're not a good Christian, or you're not a good person, or you're crazy. That's a horrible term to use. Yeah. We use it way too frequently in our society. Why not ask for help? If we have, like I said, if we have other health problems, most of us would seek treatment. Why? Mental health doesn't have to be a secret. It doesn't have to be something you have to deal with alone.
Well said. Well said. Well, folks, thank you once again for joining us. Allison, thank you again for your time. We truly appreciate that. We want to encourage you, please reach out. If you're struggling, if you need someone to talk to, someone to just listen to, don't hesitate in reaching out to us. We love you, we're praying for you, and we want to hear from you. So until next time, be blessed.